For many millennia, humans and monsters waged war against each other. The war ensued for so long that they eventually forgot why they were fighting in the first place. However, with the passing of time, humans and monsters settled their fight and started living together peacefully. Humans and monsters also began specializing in numerous fields such as medicine. One of these specialists was a human doctor named Dr. Litbeit, who lives in Litbeit, a city where humans and monsters live together peacefully. On this particular morning, Glenn was seen going for another one of his morning checkups on a patient named Saphantite, whom he diagnosed with pregnancy. Later on, Saphantite, his assistant, scolds him for treating female patients with too much care and attention. She also asks him to call her Sappy, like he formerly did when they schooled at the medical academy together. Later that night, a message arrives at Glenn's clinic, and Glenn informs Saphantite that they'll be conducting a medical checkup at Linworm Central Hospital because Dr. Thulhi, their mentor, had a lot of medical cases to attend to and had delegated her duties to them. The next day, Sappy complains about Thulhi always passing down the hardest of tasks to Glenn, but Glenn smiles and tells her that it's only because she wants him to gain more experience. After they step out of the carriage, they are welcomed by a group of arena fighters, and a centaur introduces herself as Tizalia Scythia, one of the best fighters in the arena, who also happens to be the princess of the centaurs and the heiress to city transportation. After getting himself acquainted with the locals, Glenn carries out some medical checkups on the women, while Sappy uses her tail to grab the women who kept throwing themselves at Glenn. Princess Tizalia eventually drops by for a checkup and asks Glenn if he would love to marry her, especially since he is the best suitor available at the moment. But Saphantite makes snide remarks about how Tisalia's records show that her waist size has increased in the past few months. Glenn assures Tizalia that she is in perfect condition, but after she leaves, Kay and Lorna, Princess Tisalia's attendants, visit Glenn to ask if the princess is suffering from any ailment. Glenn reveals that there is nothing medically wrong with her, but Kay and Lorna hesitate before telling him that their princess, who rarely ever won a match, had lost her last few matches. Later that night, Sappy rejoices about how they'll be going home the next day because they were done with their medical checkups, but Glenn tells her that he doesn't feel comfortable going home, especially after what he heard about Princess Tizalia. He decides to stay up all night to find out if Princess Tizalia had an illness that couldn't be discovered through physical checkups, and Sappy offers him some wine to keep him awake. The following day, Tizalia is challenged to another battle in the arena, and she loses this round, making it her 10th loss in a row. She is greatly distressed about this, as she feels like she's dragging her family's name through the mud, and she pushes herself to train harder than before. While Princess Tizalia trains in the stables, she is surprised when Glenn appears and tells her that he had found out the reason for her past losses. He reveals that it's because Tisalia's hooves had never been shod, and they were now growing in an uneven pattern, making it harder for her to balance her feet while she fought. Princess Tizalia refuses to have her hooves shod, but Kay and Lorna enter the stable and hold her in place as some blacksmiths create shoes for her. While Glenn tries to attach the shoes to her hooves, Tizalia moans dramatically, and Sappy holds her in place before shutting her up by stuffing her mouth. The shoes are finally attached, and Tizalia scolds them for doing such a distasteful thing to a princess. The following week, Princess Tizalia gives Glenn and Saphantite a special seat in the arena, and they watch as Tizalia goes on to win her 3rd match in a row. Sappy asks why Dr. Thulhi never bothered to check Tisalia's hooves in the first place, and Glenn tells her that she probably knew but had only tried to test him. He also reminds her of how Dr. Thulhi always respected her clients' wishes and wouldn't perform medical procedures on her patients without their permission. Later on, Sappy recalls how Glenn's family had taken her as a child hostage while they worked with her family to end the war. Glenn's family had kept her hostage just in case her family decided to betray them. However, she was released after the war came to an end. Glenn and Sappy had grown closer during her stay with his family, and when the time came for her to leave, they were both saddened by it. Glenn's relationship with Sappy sparked his interest in medicine for monsters, so he decided to become a medical doctor who specialized in the treatment of monsters. After enrolling in Nimia, a medical school that trained both humans and monsters in monster medicine, Glenn was pleasantly surprised to discover that Sappy had also ventured into the field of medicine. Sappy is brought out of her trance as Glenn steps in and asks if she has run out of her sunblock ointment. She realizes that her sunblock has actually finished, and Glenn suggests that they visit the Marrow waterways to get some supplies. Glenn asks Sappy to promise him that they would only get necessary supplies, as they had lots of work to do later. But she gets fascinated by different objects and stops by the gift shop. On their way home, they encounter a young mermaid named Lalala Haina, who persuades them to purchase something from her shop. Sappy asks her what she's selling, and Lalala tells them that she's an excellent singer. Glenn asks Lalala to sing 2 songs for the price of 1 and promises to pay her by giving her a medical examination. Lalala captivates Glenn and Sappy with her angelic voice, but she stops abruptly while singing her first song. Glenn offers to examine her in a private place and asks their merman guide to take them somewhere quiet. The merman leads them to the canal, and after Glenn examines Lalala, he realizes that her gills have stopped working efficiently because she is almost always outside the water. He further reveals that her body had gotten so accustomed to breathing with her lungs that it was starting to forget how to breathe underwater. Lalala tells Glenn that she has to stay above water to sing to passersby and earn enough money to take care of her mother and siblings. While she explains this, a young boy nearby falls into the water and starts drowning. Lalala swims to his rescue. Sappy and Glenn ask the merman to steer them in that direction, but he refuses, saying the canal's currents are too strong and have already overturned one boat. Lalala manages to bring the human boy to shore, and Glenn resuscitates him successfully. But then he realizes Lalala is drowning. He dives in after her, swims to the surface while carrying her, and tries to help her breathe using her gills. Glenn gives her oxygen by performing mouth-to-mouth resuscitation underwater, but he swallows too much water and almost drowns himself. Sappy arrives just in time and uses her tail to draw them out of the water. Later on, Lalala's gills become more accustomed to functioning underwater again, and Lady Scotty offers her a spot at the city singing show. Lalala thanks Glenn for his help. Sappy gets jealous that Glenn kissed Lalala underwater, realizing that Lalala has a crush on him. However, she tells Glenn she wants them to stay on somewhat friendly terms since she considers Lalala like a younger sister. Later, Kiyomiya Sonoa, a female soldier, is seen running from some armed men. She is cornered but attacks them without hesitation. Meanwhile, Dr. Glenn is helping a slime retain her physical form by immersing her in a bioliquid. Right after she leaves, someone knocks on the clinic's front door. Glenn is surprised to see Lady Scotty Dragenfeld, the city council representative and the genius behind Linworm. Lady Scotty is a dragon who took on the form of a human after descending from heaven. She succeeded in building Linworm, a city where humans and monsters could cohabitate peacefully in just 10 years. She is also rumored to be the central figure in Linworm, and everyone treats her with great respect. Kanai Zanoa, her bodyguard, steps forward and speaks on her behalf. She reveals that they had been tracking some slavers when Kiyomiya fell into one of their traps. Kiyomiya had faced 10 men and taken them down but lost her arm in the process. At the mention of this, Kiyomiya bows her head and apologizes to Lady Scotty. She further reveals that Lady Scotty wants them to find her arm and attach it back. Glenn is honored that Lady Scotty stopped by. Glenn is surprised that Lady Scotty came to his clinic, even though she could have easily approached his mentor, who owned the city's largest hospital. However, Sappy tells Lady Scotty that Glenn can't treat Kanai Zeno because she's a golem and he has no experience treating golems. They're all surprised when Glenn tells Lady Scotty that he would be honored to treat Kanai. But as soon as Lady Scotty leaves, Kanai tells Glenn that she'll find her arm herself and asks him not to follow her. Kanai encounters one of the slavers while searching for her arm and is attacked. The slaver cuts off her left leg before fleeing. Injured, Kanai crawls away, hoping to locate her missing arm before the slaver returns with reinforcements. Back at the clinic, Sappy tells Glenn that golems are creatures made from the flesh and souls of dead human bodies. Glenn realizes that whoever created Kanai was likely a deranged doctor, which helps him understand her deep-rooted hatred for medical professionals. Later, Glenn tells Sappy that he's going out to search for Kanai and her missing arm. While at the market square, he runs into Princess Tizalia, who informs him that she just saw a detached leg. She's stunned when Glenn picks it up without hesitation, but he explains that it belongs to Kanai Zeno. Princess Tizalia reveals that she's familiar with Kanai and has always admired her, not just as Lady Scotty's bodyguard, but also as a first-ranked fighter with the highest number of consecutive wins in the arena. Glenn strokes Kanai's leg and realizes she can feel it. Golems can sense contact with their skin, except for pain. He continues his search for Kanai and is informed by someone that rumors are spreading that he's gathering body parts for a grotesque experiment. They hand him Kanai's missing arm, which someone had apparently dropped in the canal. Lalala then tells Glenn where to find Kanai. Despite her protests, he tracks her down and begins to suture her wounds with care. He tells her that whoever created her must have had serious psychological issues. Meanwhile, Sappy grows worried about Glenn's whereabouts. Her best friend, Illy, stops by and jokes that Glenn is probably off flirting with some patient. Sappy feels jealous at the implication and chases Illy off. Before leaving, Illy gives Sappy an egg she found on the street. Glenn returns shortly after Illy leaves and is stunned when Sappy claims she's pregnant. Glenn is bewildered. He knows Sappy hasn't been with anyone. She clarifies that the egg was a gift from Illy. Upon inspecting it, Glenn realizes it's a harpy's egg and tells Sappy that a harpy girl must have lost it. He explains that harpies are oviparous and lay eggs during ovulation. Suddenly, Sappy's serpent instincts alert her that they're under attack. Just before the slavers break in, they escape. Outside, they run into Kanai, who explains that she's been tracking down the same slavers. These criminals have been kidnapping young harpy girls and forcing them into ovulation before selling them to humans with disturbing tastes. Kanai reveals she's currently accompanying Lady Scotty to the slavers' hideout to rescue some of the harpies and asks Glenn and Sappy to tag along. Sappy questions why civilians are being asked to infiltrate a slaver's hideout. Lady Scotty explains they received word that one of the female harpies is actively ovulating, and they need to act quickly. They head to the Marrow Waterways, where Glenn is surprised to learn that Lalala now works as a guide for Lady Scotty despite her young age. He accuses Lady Scotty of taking advantage of her, but Lalala speaks up for herself and tells him that she marrows in exchange for singing at the Central Hall and got a large sum of money that was more than sufficient to feed her family. On their way back to the slavers' hideout, They are attacked by some armed men, but Princess Tessalia and her attendants rescue them. Lalala takes them down the waterways before dropping them off at the slavers' hideout, but as soon as they climb down the boat, they are attacked by another slaver. Kanai attacks him and asks Safi and Glenn to enter the slavers' hideout. They arrive at the hideout, and Glenn notices the teenage harpies huddled around Illy, a harpy he discovers to be pregnant. Glenn assists Illy with giving birth, but the slavers arrive during the operation. To everyone's surprise, Safi rises to Glenn's defense, despite being asked to hide her skills in martial arts. Unfortunately, while Safi fights against the slavers, she is hit by a poisoned knife and passes out due to the effects of the poison. Later on, Safi wakes up and reveals how she had been trained in martial arts before being sent to his family as a hostage. She further reveals that she had been asked to kill his family if they went against the negotiations that were being made to stop the war. Glenn reveals that his family had known of this fact and a servant had secretly tried to poison her during the first week of her arrival. He also reminds her of how he had stayed by her side and nursed her health. He thanks her for this because he had learned everything he knew about medicine from her. Safi is so shocked by how Glenn had treated her with care despite her evil intentions toward him, and she tries making a move on him. But while she does this, she is suddenly paralyzed, and Glenn explains that the poison had not entirely left her body and one of its symptoms was paralysis. Glenn blushes as he tells her not to exert herself too much. He also reveals that he's going for an in-house checkup on a patient, and Safi covers her face in embarrassment. Later on, Glenn's mentor, Lady Thulhi, asks him to visit the Harpy village to carry out some physical examinations on the residents, and Princess Tessalia offers to give him a ride because she has a meeting with the village council elder, and Illy has asked to see her. Safi accompanies Glenn, and she tells him how Illy had lost so many feathers that she could no longer fly. She also tells him how Illy was an orphan with no parents or guardians to watch over her. The carriage stops abruptly. Here's the updated version of the text with corrections. Glenn and Safi step out to see Princess Tessalia, Kay, and Lorna face flat on the floor. They explain that it's because of the rough terrain, and Glenn asks if Princess Tessalia is okay. She tells him that she feels fine, but unfortunately, Kay had gotten hurt while trying to shield her. Some Harpy men who were members of CK Transportation arrive on the scene and aid them in carrying Kay to the village. They arrive at the village, and Lorna promises Kay that she would take care of Princess Tessalia. However, Lorna is unable to perform her duties efficiently because she's worried about Kay. Glenn and Safi come up with a way to make Kay more efficient in her duties by disciplining her. Glenn blindfolds Lorna and asks her to focus more on Princess Tessalia and remember her duties. This helps her become more efficient, and Princess Tessalia thanks Glenn for his help. Later on, Lorna tells Kay how Glenn had helped her perform her duties more efficiently, and Kay suggests that they thank him more intimately. After a while, Kay recuperates fully, and Safi suggests that they leave after Illy allows them to examine her. They visit Illy, and Glenn examines her but tells her that nothing is wrong with her. Glenn also reveals that she is molting. Illy claims that Glenn is a fake doctor before storming off in anger. Princess Tessalia follows after her because she recalls how Illy had originally wanted to speak with her. She flares up and leaves, and Princess Tessalia follows because she wants a word with Princess Tessalia. Princess Tessalia confronts Illy and asks her what she was really making a fuss about. Illy tells her that she wants to be an arena fighter, but Tessalia tells her that fighting is about etiquette, and a rude girl like her would never win. Illy challenges Tessalia to a battle, with the condition that she would become an arena fighter if she wins. Tessalia accepts the challenge, and she wins the match. However, she arrives at Glenn's clinic with a scratch on her neck from Illy's talons. Glenn asks if she wasn't badly hurt, but Tessalia reveals that she had beaten Illy in a duel and refused to make her an arena fighter. She also tells Glenn that becoming an arena fighter wouldn't have helped Illy because she was so used to running from her problems and staying on her own that she would have only run again. Glenn suddenly has an idea, and he asks Safi and Tessalia to help him with gathering Illy's feathers. After examining the feathers, Glenn realizes substance on Princess Tessalia is also from an arachnida. He explains that the arachnida's web has a strong adhesive property and can be difficult to remove. Tessalia, irritated by the web on her, asks Glenn to help her get it off. Glenn assures her that with hot water, the web can be easily dissolved and that she shouldn't worry too much about it. He then instructs Safi to keep an eye on the arachnida while he goes to find a way to resolve the issue. As Glenn and Tessalia work together to clean the web off her, the situation grows more complicated. Irina, ever persistent, continues to follow Illy, who is visibly uncomfortable with the attention. Glenn realizes that the best course of action is to get Irina to leave the Harpy village before any harm comes to Illy, especially now that Irina has learned about Illy's true nature as a descendant of the Phoenix. Glenn also becomes more concerned about the potential danger Irina poses in trying to capture Illy's feathers for her own use. Glenn talks to Irina, suggesting that she focus on more positive endeavors rather than chasing after mythical creatures. Irina, with her fascination for design and the unusual, reluctantly agrees to leave the Harpy village, but insists that she will return one day to learn more about the mysterious Phoenix. The situation calms down after that, but Glenn can't shake the feeling that there are still dangers lurking lurking in the background. Meanwhile, Illy begins to adjust to her new adult wings and gains more confidence. The other harpies in the village celebrate her transformation, and she's able to fly with grace for the first time, earning their admiration. Safi, who had been watching the situation closely, finally allows herself to relax, relieved that Glenn's actions have kept everyone safe. However, she still harbors some unease about the attention Glenn is getting from the other women in the village, especially now that Illy seems to have developed a soft spot for him. As the episode comes to a close, the group leaves the village, but it's clear that their journey is far from over, with the Phoenix mystery still unresolved and new threats beginning to surface. The news causes a stir in the village, and everyone is on high alert as they prepare for the arrival of the Harpy god. Glenn, Safi, and the others quickly make their way to the village's central square to see the giant figure approaching. The elder explains that the Harpy god is an ancient deity who had been slumbering for centuries. She is said to be extremely powerful, with the ability to control the natural elements and cause destruction if provoked.